Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of Project Geekology, the show where we talk about all things geeky and, make a study of it. And today we are joined with a special guest, but first let's introduce our hosts. I'm Dakota.
And I'm Anthony.
And we're joined with...
Jen.
Yes, Jen, my wife. You guys will know her if you follow our videos on Geekritique. She's the other half of the couch. And so we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, a show that means a lot to all three of us here today. Not only about why we love the series and why we believe it's great, but also some of the background behind the series, maybe some things that you don't know about, and more.
Water. Earth. Fire. Air.
So as always, before we begin, Anthony, what have you been up to this past week?
I've actually been taking a dive into a game I've been meaning to get into for a while. It's called Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch. It's really cool because it looks like one of those Studio Ghibli type. It kind of reminds me of a Studio Ghibli movie, but it's a video game. And it's really cool, and I love the art style of it. It's been fun. When you first play it, it looks like it's gonna... You're not so sure where it's gonna go because you're playing as a kid, but it's really cool because it's an RPG. It's got battle sequences, and it's really cool. It's fun.
That's awesome. I know that I've seen a few stills and videos from it, and the cutscenes are like actual animation, and it looks like a Studio Ghibli, like Hayao Miyazaki type animated thing. But the actual gameplay is more like three-dimensional, but still in that like anime vibe. So that's a cool thing that you're getting into. I've not played it, but that's something that like I've been interested in for a while.
Yeah, man, it's great. How about you? What have you been up to?
Really, the only thing I've been up to is catching up on The Legend of Korra. We're almost through with the series now. We're like halfway through the fourth and final season. And obviously, for those of you who don't know, Avatar, The Legend of Korra is the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender. And while we won't get too much into that in this episode, it may come up, just in conversation. But we'll avoid spoilers for that, obviously.
Yes, of course.
And Jen, what are you up to this past week?
Well, this was my second week of school, and I'm taking like 19 credits. So I haven't really had a lot of time to do like a lot of things that I like to do, but I have been reading Avatar Kyoshi and, watching, or The Rise of Kyoshi, and then watching Legend of Korra with you, which has been... So I've been really pretty much in my spare time just in the Avatar world.
Yeah, actually, speaking of just being in the Avatar world, because I'm writing a video right now for Geekritique about a potential third series of Avatar shows, and I started reading some of the comics that come out post Avatar: The Last Airbender that take place about a year later, and it's been really cool how even with other writers, with the help of the creators, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, the stories like kind of just flow seamlessly from the final book, the third book or season of the show into the comic series, and it's just it's an ongoing project right now, and it's pretty cool. So the canon continues basically. So there's always, hopefully, there will always be something new in the series.
I really do hope that they continue to expand on that universe because there's so much potential in it. The way that they set it up, it's almost like Doctor Who. I mean, they could keep on going in theory as long as they wanted to, because they could always reset it, just like they did with, I think, the 13th Doctor.
Right.
The generations can go on and on until they decide to, either not do any more Avatar stuff or decide that they want to, or, one of the Avatars get killed off.
Right, yeah. What I found upon rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender, and after reading the two Kyoshi books and going back to the original show, even from the first episode, when you rewatch it after knowing all that you know about the world building of the series, you can tell from the very start that the showrunners did years worth of world building, and this is literally the tip of the iceberg. And it's interesting because they start with a literal iceberg. The show starts with Aang frozen in ice in an iceberg. And I think the first episode's called The Boy in the Iceberg or something like that.
The Boy in the Ice or something like that, yeah.
You can tell just from the opening intro, where it's water, earth, fire, and air, you can tell that they did so much world building even in the Avatar cycle. The idea of like the different avatars coming from different nations each cycle. So after Avatar Aang, which is an airbender, there would be a water avatar, which would be Korra, which is what the second series is based on. A third series, if they continued moving forward, would have to be an Earth-based avatar or someone from the Earth nation or kingdoms. And it's just, you could tell they did so much world building just with that idea in mind. And they just kind of went from there.
Right. I mean, that's how the Fire Nation knew to go to the Air Nomads, because of where the cycle was.
But that all changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling that way, actually, like when I was younger and watching this show. Like, I just didn't understand why it was so short. Like, why were there only 3 books? Like, why couldn't they do more? Because you could see the potential, you know, even when it was just getting started.
Apparently, and this is something that they recently touched upon in an interview with Polygon, the creators of the show, DiMartino and Konietzko, they were asked whether the rumored 4th season of the show was canceled by Nickelodeon or if that was ever in the works, and apparently it was just a rumor. They always set out with a 3-season arc in mind. Any potential for a 4th season of the series after the battle with Fire Lord Ozai was never really in the cards. They had pitched to Nickelodeon 3 seasons, and that's what they set out to do, and that's what they did. Obviously, what's great about the comic run after the fact is you get to see more of these characters. You get to see how these characters kind of grow together and even grow apart in different ways. And I think it's such a cool experience that the world feels like a living universe. You know, it's always kind of growing and expanding in different directions. And while it always follows this one particular character in the Avatar and the people around the Avatar, it's so cool to see how their vision of these original 3 seasons, or 3 books as they're called in the show, how well they're executed, and 18 years later we're still talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fascinating, though, this show. I don't think that this show would have been the show that it was if Nickelodeon did not give the creators this like freedom, you know, this creative freedom. Because I know when it was initially pitched, they wanted to make a martial arts show, and Nickelodeon, I mean, they were with the idea, but they wanted it to be changed a bit because they don't want a bunch of kids, you know, just punching or kicking each other.
That could be a bad look.
Yeah, that could be like, oh, I learned it from this show on Nickelodeon, and yeah, that would not have been really good PR, you know?
A kid starts firebending. Oh, I just learned it from the show on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, so that's a little bit harder to replicate. But yeah, no, I think we're ready to talk, you know, a bit more about the show. You know, we're not going to go too much into spoiler territory, but just know that there might be some things that we talk about that are in the show, but, you know, we're going to do our best to not reveal anything huge, or we won't reveal anything big.
I've already, given away a big plot spoiler that I'm going to delete earlier in this episode. So, don't worry. I'm going to be editing anything out that could potentially ruin your experience even a little bit. But Anthony, tell us a little bit about the background of the series.
All right, well, I mean, it was created by Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. So, I mean, we all know that it's called Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it also went by a title that was a little less known called Avatar: The Legend of Aang. So, I mean, that kind of makes sense, you know, with how they went with The Legend of Korra with the second series. And it ran from February 21st, 2005 up until Saturday, July 19th, 2008. During that initial run, I think I was in maybe 7th grade when it first came out. So I remember when it came out. I remember when it first aired. I remember seeing the promos for it. I was like, okay, this looks pretty cool. And so, you know, I checked it out, and, you know, just the intro alone hooks you, because you're like, man, look at this world. Like, they build the world for you just in that intro alone.
Only the Avatar mastered all 4 elements. Only he could stop the ruthless firebenders. But when the world needed him most, he vanished.
It's true.
It's like, oh my goodness. So, and it's like the firebenders, they're attacking, there's, these people, they have these powers, and it's like, you want to know more about this world. When a show starts off, there's character development. Not every show or book is going to start off 100 miles an hour when it comes to character development. You start seeing just a little pod of what that character could blossom into.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really cool, just how the show just starts off. It gets you ready.
Yeah, absolutely. The first couple episodes are slower, and some might even say more childish. It's not until they go to, I believe it's the Southern Air Temple, that you start understanding more of the depth of the world.
And if firebenders found this temple, that means they found the other ones too. I really am the last airbender.
Obviously, from the I think it's the first or second episode, they introduce the Fire Nation, and Avatar Aang gets his first real interaction with this oppressive rulership, this oppressive government that's trying to, destroy any trace of the Avatar and potentially rule the entire world. And it's a lot for a kid's cartoon,
Yeah.
If you really think about what they were capable of putting into some of the themes that they were capable of putting into this series and making it applicable and enjoyable for kids, it's really crazy.
Yeah.
The idea of you can do it kind of runs the gamut of like throughout the entire series, like what you're going to be getting in terms of like really profound themes like domestic terrorism. You have stuff like the merits of freedom and personal choice when you're put into positions of even going against your family or your loved ones or your nation. It talks. There's themes of loyalty. There's themes of friendship, and those are pretty common in like children's cartoons and games and stuff. But it gets really deep.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't stop with just the children characters, even though you're following a bunch of characters that are like between 12 and 15 years old. Some of the older characters that may at first seem like comic relief turn out to be hugely influential to the characters in the series and, pockets of wisdom. I'm thinking of you, Uncle Iroh.
Sometimes the best way to solve your own problems is to help someone else.
Dude, come on. Always. That will always be my favorite character in that show.
Yeah?
That it will always be my favorite character. He's just one of those characters that I know that a lot of people like. Some people might have other favorite characters, but he'll always be like that one well-liked character. You think back in his past, and he was, this prominent general in the 100-Year War. He led the siege of Ba Sing Se. That's not really, I wouldn't say too much of a spoiler because it doesn't dig too deep into that. He does not want to be that person. You can already see that he's kind of haunted by that, by the defeat, but really just, you can tell that he wanted to turn a new leaf, just how he is throughout the whole show.
Yes, a new tea leaf.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Jen, who's your favorite character?
Zuko. Easy. I love Zuko. Yeah.
Zuko had a great
First
arc.
of all, he's fine. He's super fine. And second of all, he he has an amazing arc. You immediately, even though you don't agree with him at the beginning, you can empathize with him. And I think for me, because I also, like you, Anthony, started watching the show probably at about like the same age, like 7th grade when it came out. And I do think that that's an interesting theme, that it helps you to empathize with the villains. Even if someone's against you, you need to learn to understand where they're coming from. And I think that's a fantastic lesson for kids. And I just, he became one of my favorite characters, even though he is the bad guy, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, you always know that his goal is the wrong one.
Mm-hmm.
You know the side of good and you know the side of evil in this
Right.
series. But Zuko kind of fits into a gray area where he's trying to, reclaim honor from his people.
Right.
You're like my sister. Everything always came easy to her. She's a firebending prodigy, and everyone adores her. My father says she was born lucky. He says I was lucky to be born. I don't need luck, though. I don't want it. I've always had to struggle and fight, and that's made me strong. It's made me who I am.
I don't think that's a spoiler because they talk about it in like the first couple episodes.
Yeah, like in the first like few episodes, I mean, it shows that his goal is to capture the Avatar.
Yeah,
he's trying to reclaim this honor. And the reason why I like Iroh is that Iroh really becomes the father that Zuko is searching. Mm-hmm. He becomes this character that, you know, Zuko just, I mean, he's very resistant in the beginning. Iroh's trying to be this person. He's trying to support his nephew, but he's also trying to really keep him grounded. Mm-hmm. And so the reason why I just enjoy him is because he definitely has an impact on Zuko later in the series.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. He's Uncle Iroh always wants what's best for his nephew, and he's willing to, I guess, go out of his comfort zone and his moral compass, because I think as an older man who's kind of world weary, he sees the world a little differently, or he sees the world very differently from his nephew, and he wants to do what's best for not only his nephew's honor, but for his personal well-being. And it's interesting because these are the villains. These are the villains that we've just spent a couple minutes empathizing with.
Yeah.
And
you're so conflicted.
We love them.
You're just so conflicted because, like, am I supposed to hate this person? Because I really like them.
Yeah, and that's so crazy for a kid's cartoon to do, to like show you that, you know, the bully, the enemy of the series, the antagonist,
right,
isn't the worst person ever, even though he's trying to do the worst thing ever.
And there are definitely like bigger fish out there that are more evil, which you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
I think too with Zuko, it's like he's trying to reclaim honor, but he's doing things that are dishonorable. And I think this is something that Aang and a lot of the characters go through at some point during the show, is the need to separate yourself from the traditions that you were raised by and learn to make your own choices and be your own person.
Yeah.
Which is a really, huge lesson for a kid's show too.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was a kid and I really liked it. I liked the show a lot. And even in high school, I bought all the DVDs and I just like watch them all the time. And my mom was like really worried about me. She was like, "This is why you're never going to get a boyfriend." Because I didn't have a boyfriend until I was much older. And, like, she's like, "You need to watch like normal teenage shows, like watch Gossip Girl. Look at what your brother's girlfriend is watching. Do stuff like that." Like, she was really stressed out about it. And she was like, "Why are you still watching cartoons? Like, you need to develop into a teenager." And I was like, "This is amazing though."
I'm telling you, I was one of those high schoolers that watched cartoons. And I mean, when you have shows like the Avatar out there, what can blame you?
Exactly, yeah. Because it's like, to my mom, she wasn't watching it. So to her, she's like, you're still watching, like, to her, it's like the same as Dora the Explorer. She's like, why are you still watching this? And for me, I'm like, well, it's actually, like, it is very mature in a lot of ways. So even as a high school student, like, I still totally related to the show. And even as an adult, I do too.
What's fascinating about American cartoons or Western cartoons is that there's a cultural mindset of people who go into them or like grow up around them, that they're meant for kids, that these are their only value is to children. What's fascinating to me about Avatar is it takes some of its influence from Eastern anime, Japanese anime.
Yes.
Well, there is some like Japanese influence in the show. Most of it's Chinese, some of it's Indian, but it's like a big Asiatic thing. But the actual like drawing style is very anime.
Yes.
And what's interesting about anime is there's anime for kids, there's anime for adults, and I would say there's actually probably more anime for adults than there is anime for kids. The lines are blurred when it comes to what is meant for adults and what is meant for children in Japanese culture in terms of anime, because they don't have they do have big productions of like live action stuff, but for the most part, their primary output into the world in terms of footage is all anime. You know, that's their leading export in terms of culture. And that idea of not having a show necessarily based only towards children or only towards adults kind of bleeds into Avatar, because while it is aimed at children, it can just as well or just as easily be enjoyed by adults. And I think in some cases I enjoy it more now than when I first was introduced to it, even though I was an adult when Jen introduced me a couple years back.
No, for sure. And the biggest thing about the Avatar is that it treats its characters, even though they're children, it treats them mature. It treats them as being able to handle more than, say an adult would think that a child can handle. I mean, which in reality, that's the truth. A lot of adults don't understand how much a child can be mature. I mean, you can learn from children, and so the show really, shows the maturity of children. I mean, Aang, he's 12 years old. He grew up around monks, but he still displayed a certain wisdom.
What's really interesting, and you don't really see it until they first visit the Southern Air Temple, is how much the weight of the world is on these 3 kids' shoulders.
Right.
And as the show goes on, there's more people that they introduce, more children that help save the world. And not only children, though. Some of the people they meet along the way end up helping later on in the series. And it kind of goes to show that in some instances, you're required in life to grow up faster than you would normally based on your age. With Aang, it's interesting because he was put into position as the Avatar, or he was trained as the Avatar much earlier than most avatars out there are trained. So in every other aspect, the Avatar doesn't really become like a world figure until they're 16. But because of the impending threat, the impending doom of the Fire Nation taking over and no other Avatar being present, Aang was required to grow up at a faster rate. And what's fascinating is that he actually shrunk away. He hid for literally 100 years. He didn't purposely hide for 100 years, but he got stuck in a state where he was hidden for 100 years.
Aang, how long were you in that iceberg?
I don't know, a few days maybe?
I think it was more like 100 years.
What? That's impossible. Do I look like a 112-year-old man to you?
Right. The craziest thing also about Aang is that the fact that he had a lot less time to master the other 3 elements than than literally all these other avatars that we know about. Korra, she had all those years she mastered 3 of them before coming to airbending. Mm-hmm. I don't know much about Kyoshi, so you can probably kind of talk a little bit more, but with Aang had to take care of this before or he fought on I don't want to reveal any of that.
Yeah, so. It's so tough. Every time I go to talk, I'm like, I think that's a spoiler.
He needed to complete his training as the Avatar within a certain amount of time,
right?
Before the Fire Nation was at their peak in power, and I think he really only had about 8 months. I think the entire first 3 seasons, or the only 3 seasons, take place within a period of 8 to 9 months.
Right.
It's kind of incredible the amount of weight that is put onto this poor 12-year-old kid's shoulders. What's great about Korra is that she definitely knew that she was the Avatar from a very young stage.
She had a lot of time to train.
She was able to at least partially bend 3 elements as a toddler, so that's pretty great.
I'm the Avatar! You gotta deal with it!
So she was good to go there. Kyoshi is a unique case where she didn't know that she was the Avatar until she was actually 16 years old. And we know that Roku, he had many years to train as he was a Fire Nation Avatar before Aang. He had many years that he was able to train to master all 4 elements. So Aang was very specific in the sense that he had to grow up real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's you feel that rush, which is kind of like real life, I guess, in a way. When you hit a certain point, things just keep moving forward and your decisions become very crucial to your future. But I just felt like with Avatar, it's especially when the whole gang gets together, there's so little time for them all to be together because it's just constantly like rushing forward. And I wish that we could have gotten more time with, you know what I mean, like with everybody.
So DiMartino and Konietzko, they consulted Sifu Kisu. He's a master of Northern Shaolin Kung Fu, but he also is an expert in other forms, and so they consulted him. They wanted to fit specific styles to each element. Sifu Kisu, he decided with waterbending would be Tai Chi, which is less about strength and aggression and more about alignment and control. And you can kind of see that with waterbending. Earthbending is called Hung Gar, which is, it uses a stronger stance and is more rooted to the ground. I don't know if you noticed that when you see earthbenders earthbend.
Mm-hmm. And I think the earthbending martial art Hung Gar is Indonesian. It's very like stance based, you know, it's very grounded. The idea is not to be knocked over.
Oh, that's why you have that whole training scene with Toph where she's rolling the big like stones at him, and he needs to stay stable and hold his ground.
Right.
Get in your horse stance. I'm going to roll that boulder down at you. If you have the attitude of an earthbender, you'll stay in your stance and stop the rock.
Right. And then, so firebending, he used the style that he's most proficient at, which is Northern Shaolin Kung Fu, which is a lot more aggressive and dynamic. I mean, it's very, you can tell, it's a very aggressive style that goes well with, fire. And airbending is called Bagua, which uses a lot of like circle movements and spins, which, just naming off these different styles and what their stances are really just makes sense for each element.
If you ever get the opportunity, definitely go on YouTube and look up like Tai Chi movements or Hung Gar or Bagua, and you'll see the different inspirations for the movements of all of these earthbending techniques and stuff and styles. And it's super cool because you can kind of visualize, wow, this guy, you know, if he was in the Avatar universe, he'd be airbending or waterbending. Like the Tai Chi is very fluid. So the idea that it just translates so well to the cartoon.
Yeah, Sifu Kisu would be the real life Avatar.
Is he? Okay, cool.
Kind of like Jen, this is funny. I also bought, I only got the first one. I got book 1 on DVD. My sisters they were so into that show also, and we pulled our money together, and so we bought the first season, and so we watched through it together, and so they had a lot of behind the scenes stuff, so I got to see some of this stuff on the special features. And so, they really did a lot of work for this show.
One of the things that I found really awesome going back to the series later on was looking up some of the actors that portrayed some of the characters. And there's some pretty big name people in this series that voice some of these characters that you might not even know. Like Fire Lord Ozai was played by Mark Hamill. That's hilarious and awesome and perfect for him.
Yeah, that's insane.
We also have other people like Jason Isaacs on the series and Clancy Brown, other big name actors that showed up. But I think the genius of the series was actually casting children to play the main cast. Because, you have plenty of cartoons where they voice, like I think of the Rugrats. You have fully grown adult actors and actresses playing those babies. But in this series, we actually had children, you know, and I think that's so cool. One of my favorite things, because I'm a fan of Arrested Development, is Mae Whitman, who plays Anne, or some remember her as Egg from Arrested Development. Or May and Egg. Yeah, she plays Katara in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and honestly, just perfect casting. Jack Desana as Sokka, Zach Tyler Eisen as Aang, and Dante Bosco as Zuko. So these frankly kids at the time nailed these roles, and I think actually putting children into the series brings out their vulnerability a little bit because, you know, as a kid, you know other kids when you hear them.
No, I think that it helped increase the authenticity of the show. I really enjoyed how they had all these different cultures in the show, like the water tribes, you know, that they're, you know, Inuits.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cool. The firebending, or the Fire Nation, where it was more styled after like a Japanese culture. The Earth Kingdom was based more on like China, and the Air Nomads, or the Air Nomads, they were based on Tibetan monks. And so I thought that was really cool that they went with that they decided to take these different cultures. You know, it made sense, you know, that like it really fit with the cultures that they decided to go with in the show.
Each country felt unique.
Right.
Each culture felt fleshed out. And some of it was even like meshed together a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ba Sing Se was just a melting pot of Chinese cultures. You have the Southern Water Tribe. Sokka is, they kind of mix him a little bit with the Mohican, with like his tomahawk and boomerang and stuff. And even his haircut is very like Mohican. But yeah, I love how they just blended so many different cultures, Asiatic cultures particularly,
Mm-hmm.
to create a fantasy world. And Jen, we were talking about this recently. You know, so often in fantasy, we are given medieval English or feudal European fantasy settings, and or they're based off of those settings. You know, you think of Game of Thrones; it's very European.
Yes.
To see a fantasy world that's so different from that is really cool.
And the thing that I really enjoyed about it was that, I mean, it was a world. It was a world of magic, but it didn't feel like magic. It felt different. It was authentic. You know, they used chi, which is, you know, like their form of quote unquote mana, you know? And so the fact that they went about it in that kind of way, and it felt different, it felt fresh. It, you know, in a way, it's kind of like Naruto, where they use jutsus, and so like that's, I mean, essentially that's magic too. And so, but it doesn't feel like magic. So that's what I enjoy.
It's a very unique magic system, definitely.
Right.
And it's partially based, again, on a few things. The chi is something that's very grounded in Buddhism, but you also have like the 4 elements that Plato first came up with:
Right.
earth, fire, water, and air. And I just think it's a stroke of genius to like, you know, kind of pair off these different element types to different nations and kind of build cultures around them. You can almost when you're in the Earth Kingdom, or, you know, when you're visiting Boomy, I think it's in episode 5.
Oh, I love him.
You see how this city has literally developed around the usage of earthbending. When you visit the Fire Lord Ozai in like several different scenes throughout the series, his whole palace is kind of encompassed in flame, and all the different, you know, even like the different lanterns and stuff in the background are stylized in a way that just kind of looks and feels like fire.
Yeah.
And obviously the air nomads, you know, above the clouds, their temples there. It's just fantastic world building. And
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, each element, the way that they situated each one of these nations, you know, it just was so fitting, and it you know, their surrounding pertained very well with the elements of, you know, of each bending nation.
So what do you guys think that, like, what kind of benders do you think you'd be?
Ooh. Well, you first, Jen, because you asked the question.
You guys know I have a hot temper. I'm a firebender through and through. Most of my power comes from pure rage. I don't know why I'm such an angry person, but
Yeah.
here I stand. Firebender.
Okay. Anthony, what about you?
I mean, I've thought about this just so much. Firebending. I love firebending. I thought that it was such a cool element watching it on the show. So, I mean, firebending is more appealing to me.
Yeah, I like the ones too where, I mean, airbending has the same quality. Like, you can't take that element away from me. Like, fire, you produce it yourself. Air surrounds you, but the fire comes from within, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough for me. I don't think I'd be a firebender. I think I'm pretty calm for the most part. And I think a lot of it has to do with mood. And fire is a very mood-based element. I think I would either be water or air. I like to go with the flow when I can, but for the most part, I think I'd probably be closest as an air nomad.
Yeah, I think you would be too. Like, Tenzin from The Legend of Korra reminds me of Dakota a lot. A lot.
I agree with her. And Tenzin's my favorite character in The Legend of Korra.
Yeah, he's great.
He's just like the perfect mentor figure, but he doesn't get everything right, you know? He does his best.
Tenzin, please, don't send me back home.
You blatantly disobeyed my wishes and the orders of the White Lotus.
Katara agreed with me that I should come. She said my destiny is in Republic City.
Don't bring my mother into this.
But yeah, I think I like the purity of the air nomads a lot. Apparently, like, according to the Kyoshi books, like, if an air nomad, and this isn't really a spoiler, if an air nomad loses sight of their morality, they can totally lose their ability to airbend. So it's almost like a checking thing, you know? Like, you keep yourself in check, or you lose your ability to do the things that you can.
And that's crazy. I feel like we could probably make an episode that's a little bit more spoiler-esque, because there's a lot more, like, into it.
Why not just like a full-fledged spoiler episode? Like, I think people who are gonna watch or listen to something like this might already have watched the show.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a fantastic idea. I'm sure, Jen, you would love to come back to talk spoilers.
Yeah, I kind of invited myself.
We've been holding ourselves back from a flood of just like gushing about certain characters and certain scenes and stuff.
Yes.
So we're gonna wait a little bit. We don't know how long. Could be a couple weeks. Could be a couple months. But we'll come back. We'll talk about spoilers for Avatar: The Last Airbender. But what we're really excited about coming up is we're going to be revisiting Black Panther. And obviously it's a hugely timely topic. We didn't want to immediately jump into it just out of respect for Chadwick Boseman, who recently passed. We hope that we can just have a nice conversation about the film, what it means to us, and how, you know, with the new revelations of Chadwick Boseman passing, we can take more from the actual finished product. And so that's what we're going to be talking about next week. Please be sure to subscribe to us so that you get to see that episode and any other episodes that we have down the line.
I think that next week's episode will be really cool. I definitely would like to, definitely explore the character of Black Panther. And I do think that talking about Chadwick Boseman's portrayal of Black Panther and how he impacted the world portraying him, I do believe that next week's episode will be just a fantastic insight into Black Panther.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you so much for listening to this discussion of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Stay tuned for a spoilery look at Avatar: The Last Airbender. And if you haven't checked out the show in its entirety yet, please be sure to do so. It's not long. It'll take you a couple weeks if you watch a few episodes a day. And we know that you'll really enjoy it because it really is that good. Jen, thank you so much for coming on today. We loved your company.
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
this
Jen.
was fun.
Thank you for being
and
our first guest.
From my bedroom to the living room.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real, Jen. You were gonna always be the first guest because I mean, it was inevitable. But yeah,
Thanks,
the reason
guys.
why we didn't jump into spoiler territory for this episode is that they released it on Netflix recently, so it's definitely gotten a resurgence. So we want people to be able to watch the show before we really delve into it even deeper. But we did want to be able to kind of explain some of the behind the scenes and some of the characters that we really connected with, and also with some of the elements that we identify with. And so yeah, definitely thank you guys for staying tuned, and thank you for the feedback that you guys have been just extending out to us. And you know, we definitely enjoy it, and we love talking about these things that we love so much. And so stay tuned for next week, and have a great week. Stay safe, use a mask.
Thanks guys, have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.